por su presencia. Estamos en la cuarta sesión de este seminario sobre estudios del futuro que hemos organizado en el Colegio de México, en el Centro de Estudios Internacionales, y el cual se va a dedicar a partir de inicio hace unos meses, ¿no? Y el propósito es hablar de los problemas más centrales, más fundamentales, que se presentan en el futuro a la humanidad entera, al mundo, ¿no? Y que obviamente nos van a afectar a México, y en algunos casos nos van a afectar mucho más a México que a los países desarrollados, por ejemplo, el caso de migraciones, el caso de calentamiento global, ¿no? Entonces, esa es un poco la idea de este seminario, y tenemos el gusto de tener con nosotros a la profesora Michelle Rioux. Es profesora del Centro de Estudios sobre la Integración y la Mundialización. De hecho, es la directora del Centro de Estudios sobre la Integración y la Mundialización, el CEIM, en la Universidad de Quebec, en Montreal. Es profesora titular de esa universidad, del Departamento de Ciencia Política, desde 2006. Dirige el centro, el CEIM, desde 2011, y es especialista en economía política internacional. Sus investigaciones han sido muy amplias, y no solamente tiene varias investigaciones de diversos campos, básicamente de economía política internacional, ¿no? Sino tiene muchísimas publicaciones. Al final voy a hablar sobre algunas de ellas, de sus más recientes. Sus investigaciones se han abocado al estudio de las organizaciones internacionales y la gobernanza global, el regionalismo, la integración económica. Uno de los temas más importantes que he tocado, obviamente, es el Tratado de Libre Comercio de los Estados Unidos y los cambios que ha sufrido este tratado en los últimos años, en la última negociación. De hecho, tiene un libro sobre ese tema, que es NAFTA 2.0. Creo que solamente está en francés, ¿no? No sé si está en inglés, pero podemos preguntar. Este libro es del primer NAFTA al acuerdo entre Estados Unidos, Canadá y México, al acuerdo actual. Después, otros temas es el regionalismo, la integración económica, las empresas transnacionales, la competencia internacional y la situación. Una de las cosas que más le ha interesado es la situación del empleo, del trabajo, en este ámbito de las empresas transnacionales y de la competencia internacional. Más recientemente, la profesora Liu se ha enfocado en el estudio de la sociedad de la información y del sector de telecomunicaciones, algo que el seminario de estudios sobre el futuro le interesa muchísimo, ¿no? Vemos cómo se ha extendido las tecnologías de la información antes de la pandemia, pero de forma impresionante durante la pandemia, durante estos últimos 2 años. Entonces, ella estudia este sector de telecomunicaciones, el comercio electrónico, ni qué decir sobre esto, durante la pandemia. Y todavía más interesante el enfoque que le da a las industrias culturales, ¿no? Frente al auge del comercio electrónico. Algunos de sus textos más recientes sus libros más recientes voy a hablar sobre algunos, tienen muchísimas publicaciones. Voy a hablar sobre algunos libros, voy a citar solamente. Hacia una política comercial socialmente responsable en un contexto de tensiones comerciales, es un libro publicado por la Universidad de Quebec. Otro texto es Dilemas de la gobernanza en Canadá, Norteamérica y más allá. Es un libro de Paul Grave, ¿no? El que ya mencioné, de NAFTA, de la negociación del primer NAFTA al acuerdo Estados Unidos, Canadá y México. También acaba de dirigir, de salir hace unos meses un número de la revista, una revista muy importante que publica la Universidad de Quebec, que se llama Intervención Économique, ¿no? Y este número fue sobre un mundo en transformación, la mundialización ante la crisis, el impacto de la COVID-19 sobre la gobernanza global. Y finalmente un libro muy reciente, el más reciente creo, es muy interesante, ¿no? Todos conocemos a Karl Polanyi, ¿no? El gran economista, antropólogo, filósofo, que vivió en los años, bueno, la mitad del siglo pasado. Su hija vive en Canadá y es también una economista política muy importante, ¿no? Y Michel Rioux escribió un libro sobre su vida, sobre su aporte a la economía política canadiense, que se llama de esa manera, Karl Polanyi Levitt y la economía política canadiense, y está publicado por Levitt. Bueno, como ustedes ven, tenemos una gran suerte de tener entre nosotros a Michel Rioux, que estudia un tema fundamental para entender el futuro, y le agradecemos muchísimo su plática sobre, y es una plática que va a hacer en inglés, ¿no? Sobre regulation of the companies of electronic commerce, the case of the cultural industries, ¿no? Entonces, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm very glad that you're with us, ¿no? And so I give you the floor, no? The virtual floor now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ilan, for this kind invitation, and also for this introduction, which was really rich. I was reflecting also on, everything that you said, and it might seem like a lot, but I think that one thread in my work is always trying to understand how the world changes, how the world changes through structural changes, but also institutional changes. And I do not focus only on, international relations, state relationship, but also take into account the new diplomacy, if you like, especially in the digital economy, the private actors that were always at the core of my interest, the evolution of the firms. And that brings me back to talk about Karl Polanyi Levitt. I received the book here, and I met Karl when I was doing my master's degree. And she was in the economics department, and I was in the political science department, mind you, working from a political economy standpoint. And I was really struck by her. At the time, it's fair to say that her father, who is Karl Polanyi, was not really well known or famous. And at the end of my PhD, I always, everybody that knows Carrie Levitt anyway, I always stay close to her because she's a very wonderful lady. And she's going to turn 100 years old next week. So that's quite an extravagant and extraordinary life that she had. And I was really influenced by her interest in the multinational firm. And my PhD was on competition policy in the telecommunications. So that's how it's always been interested for me to look at the changes of the telecommunication sector. And that brought me to the topic that I will talk about today. Just in terms of my theoretical background, I'm really close to, I was really much influenced by La théorie de la régulation, the French school on regulation. Mind you, we know that regulation theory always was more like centered on, the national, compromises or regulatory models, especially the Fordism and how it allowed capitalism to stabilize. And I think one of the problem with this theory, even though I was really much influenced by it, is the fact that we have to we would need to move beyond Fordism, and that is where I think the structuralism, like trying to understand the structural changes, is very important for regulation theory, especially if we want to move to a more like transnational regulation theory, a regulation theory that can explain different institutional mechanism that try, in a good and a bad way, whatever, let's not be normative, but, institutional new trajectories that try to stabilize the world economy and the capitalist system in which we live, which is quite chaotic right now. Everybody knows that. So that's I wouldn't say like I'm from the regulation theory, but I was always close to these people that you invited, like Robert Boyer and Pascal Petit and Bruno Terret, and I was really much involved in that problem, the problem and how we can study change. So that brings me to the topic that I want to talk and share with you, and of course, it's less of a theory than it's more of a protocol of research, because when you study changes, it moves, so you have to have like an evolutionary thinking at the same time as your subject is moving. But this is life in its essence. So I think it's not a bad posture. And it brings me to reflect right now on a main idea, which is the idea of asymmetry, asymmetrical. And I see asymmetrical relationship in the competition, in this quest of actors, traditional actors, new actors, state, facing asymmetries that are structural. We'll talk about that. Of course, when we talk about Google, Apple, Facebook, all these new actors, not so new anymore because they dominate the world, but they have been able to get into new sectors of economy. They're not just like in the tech or the digital world, they have been able to spread, and that has created a lot of asymmetrical asymmetries, and also informational asymmetries, because you were talking about the data. We were talking about the data world, and we know that we are data-less, more or less, and the big GAFA, the tech world, the tech companies, the ones that dominate more and more, they are based on this business model that exploits, I would say, capture and exploit all the data that we collectively share with them without them asking for it. And this is an asymmetrical asymmetry that we need to address. And it's also regulatory asymmetries, because more and more this world, the tech world, is run, dominated, and also regulated by the private companies themselves. That might change, because now, in this chaotic world, we're more and more talking about, and even the tech world is trying to, or evolving in that discourse, meaning that they will have to take responsibility, and they will have to accept more and more public oversight over their activities. The big question is how to do that. And every regulatory agency in the world that will tell you that they know how to do it, they're very, I would say, not ambitious, because being ambitious is correct, but I would say that they're being pretentious, because the regulatory framework has to be in tune with the structural changes, which I will talk about, but also it has to be digital ready. It has to be digital, not only having, geek mind, the tech mind, which is not obvious for everyone. I mean, I study that, but I don't have a techno brain. So it's important, because more and more regulatory agencies have to have like this team of people, and they're very much captured themselves by the big tech company. So there is a financial, also human resources asymmetrical relationship that reinforces the divide and the problems that we face. So to make it more interesting to the young people, I would have to maybe go back to just a small example to understand the problem that I was trying to analyze. And with my team, we're trying to build a data set and methodology to study the problem, and to not only study the problem, but to understand the problem. To not just say, oh, that's the problem. No, how is it? Like, everybody has an opinion on the tech company and the tech world, but really very few people are really like hands on the problem and trying to really, put your hand in the box, in the black box. So my example starts with people that are old enough to remember. They remember that when we were listening to music or watching movies, or even like reading books, but mostly music and audiovisual, because that will something that I will talk about more, because my team were working on these two sectors specifically. But this can be extended to many more sectors, and maybe in the discussion we can talk about how it extends to other sectors. But I remember when I was young, I was at this TV, and I had to watch, the TV guide, and to understand that. And there was somebody at the TV programming channel that was deciding about how the chronology, and then everybody would fight for prime time and everything like that. But you were glued to that TV screen, and sometimes you would go to the movie theater and see a new movie or an old movie for that. As a matter of fact, that was also very possible. Old movie that were being rescreened on Saturday morning or Sunday morning. So that was a very organized nationally, and it was nothing that a company that outside of the cultural industry would be able to provide to you. These were specialized, very national, and it was financed in most countries, and different models. There was a variety of models, but every country, and Mexico and Canada are on the same page, and that we had a cultural policy to finance local content, everything, and trying to also regulate with quotas. So that brings the trade element. Quotas or ways to make sure that it was not only myself in front of the TV watching American movies, okay? Because of course, the U.S. moving picture industries, television industries are were dominant at the time as they are now, even though they have been also shaken up by the tech industry, but they are modernizing and they're back again. So it was a very, when we talk about the way it was structured, it was really much a national regulatory system that was there to provide a rich cultural industry, and so that actors and creators and producer would be able to survive in this, even though there was a strong international element. But of course, everything changed, now the young people that are here, they don't know that world. They don't remember that we had to buy a record to listen to it or to open the radio, which was also mostly regulated in every country, so that there would be local content on the radio and artists could be heard on the radio. Everybody that is under 25, even 30, now they have forgotten these ways of consuming, and all the actors are now dependent on new actors, the tech industry, the Google, I think the YouTube, everybody goes to YouTube to watch a movie or to listen to music, or they go on Apple, they go on Netflix. And so what happened is that we are in a world, and we have called that the 5 Ds, so it's dematerialized, Now you don't buy a cassette video to watch. You don't buy a record. Nobody does that except for, collection or whatever, to be cool or whatever, But, we all, who would have said that, I studied telecommunication, and it was crazy idea to think that one day I could use my telephone and my internet connection to actually, get access to music, free music. Oh yeah, the term free, it's not always free, but mostly free. And it's interesting because we have to talk about the business model after, right? But, the idea, the first D is the dematerialization. And that has a lot of importance because, yes, the music, the content that were materialized before now can go through that fiber or whatever, that connection, and get to you, in a matter of seconds. You don't even have to go to the library or the record player store to consume, So, and because it's dematerialized, it comes to the second D, it's also deterritorialized. Yeah. It always shocked me to understand that these new media, that are not so new anymore, but, when they arrived, they were outside of the regulatory framework. They were outside of the trade system, but because they were dematerialized, they came as service, and that cultural service, it's a product as could be a material product, but it's not. It's now the service. It comes under a different set of rules, and Netflix, for instance, never asked Canada to be able to get onto the internet and to come into our home. But it's funny to say that most radio broadcaster in Canada, if you look at the laws, they have to be Canadian companies. You see, so that is the core of the asymmetrical relationship that I've talked before. It's at the core of that. Since it was dematerialized, deterritorialized, it could go around the set of regulation and claim the market with an advantage. Okay. And let's talk about a little bit of the data, because that access to internet and to your IP and your equipment, Apple has this advantage of having this equipment, which will, follow you. Actually, you follow your phone everywhere, I guess. It's not the other way around. It's like we follow our phone, we just go like this. The phone is guiding us. It's not I carry my phone, it's the phone is carrying me. But you see, it's when I talk about structural change, I try to also illustrate that, because it's very, when you think about it, it's two worlds. There's an old world and there's a new world, and it creates a lot of asymmetrical relationship. The other big D that, so to understand the structural changes is the decompartmentalization. I'm sorry for my English, it's a little bit rusty. Decompartmentalization. And it's because it's the sectors that I'm talking about. we talk about convergence, the sectors before, they were frontiers, not only national frontiers, but sectoral frontiers. Broadcaster could not go into telecom, and telecom could not go into informatics or bureautics. It was completely separated, and it was done for a reason, because everyone that controlling the pipeline, should not control the content, and that has a lot of importance for the democratic society that we live in. And that's why we're so we're facing this big problem, because now everybody, like all this Facebook, are becoming news, Apple News, Google News, and and they're controlling the information and the content, not only the music that we listen to, which is a big problem, or the movie that we listen to, without it being regulated properly by any kind of actor, public actor. And so the decompartmentalization, when I talked about new media, this is it. The new media was the one that were through an equipment or through a connection, a service, telecommunication service could bring you all kinds of other things, So it creates a problem, because now we have to have laws and regulation that are able to cross those boundaries. And we have been segmented in our minds and into regulation between different worlds, and they don't talk about the same language, these worlds. Let me give you an example. First of all, the trade sector. Trade was not about services. It was not about culture. We had the cultural exception, so we didn't want to talk about culture being a good, traded good, free trade. It was not an idea like this. In the world of trade, they see regulation. Well, this is an old idea, and I think it must change, and it will change. But trade see regulation as protectionism, a barrier. I see the contrary. We need regulation to help free trade, because otherwise we'll just have one-way trade or dominated trade by oligopolistic behaviors and companies. The world of culture, if you talk about cultural actors or, the milieu of culture, they don't like trade. They don't talk trade. They talk culture, identity. So it's another world with another set of preoccupation, and they talk about regulation, about, like cultural policies, etc., etc. And there is a digital world now, So it's not only about sectors converging, it's also trade, culture, and the digital. The digital, what they talk about? They talk about transnationalism, no barrier, free internet, internet neutrality, the world of internet governance, which I studied too, because I was obliged to if I wanted to understand. It's another, they're internet society, the ICANN. They don't want state regulation. They don't want national boundaries. Except for Russia or China or, Saudi Arabia, but, they tried to have the Cold War of the internet at one point in 2000, just while the Snowden scandal was happening. But, it's just, it's not just dominant in the internet world. The domination in the internet world is this no frontier, this linked and this, and we like that. And I'm sure all the young people around listening, at the seminar, they understand, this open, this idea of this open internet, which has no regulation. But of course, now we're obliged to understand that if we want to make it free, we will have to maybe regulate it a little bit. So because now there is a lot of captation, and there's a lot of, how do you say, it's not this way of everything is on the internet and everything is free and accessible. No, everything is being populated by business model, and that's what we have to fight for. So it's a very, very different problem. But let me go back to my structural changes. It's very difficult to, if we want to have like trade regulation, we have to have these people that will have the sectoral knowledge, like for instance, the cultural industry, or can be another industry, but we're talking about this case today. And we have to have the digital people, and we have to have the trade people. And these people are not at the same school. They are not formatted the same way. They do not use the same language, and usually they don't like each other. That's a reality. I know, because I work with all of them, and sometimes I have difficulty because I have to manage a very diplomatic ground so that they don't fight too much, and understand that if we do not have institutions and regulatory schemes that are able to have this arbitration of interest between the trade world, the cultural world, and the digital world, then it's not going to be evolving in a good way. If we want to talk about, public good, what, and then I'll come back to that. What do we want? What kind of internet do we want? And to understand that, we have to understand the problem specifically. And that's why I will tell you what we did at my center to understand that. So just to finish the 5 Ds, delinearization. Well, my example was that, before it was linear. You could not shift the streaming with Spotify. You were listening to the radio. Traditional radio was a programming. And that programming involved intermediation. That means a producer or programming actor that was thinking about that, and they were under specific regulation. But with the new tech companies entering into invading, as it's per se, the cultural industries, they made this process of disintermediation, killing the intermediation, So they kick the intermediation, the old producer, programming actors. And I know in Canada, everybody are now dependent on these new actors, per se, the re-intermediation. It's not only peer-to-peer. Before it was the pirates, not the pirate of the Caribbean, but the pirates, of the internet sharing. All the young people do that, right? I mean, they share music, whatever. They don't pay for that, or movies or whatever. They have ways around the internet to find this stuff, right? But it's not that, now we're away from that pirate culture, and we are into this big companies that can, and let me now talk about their business model. Through their equipment or their research motor de recherche, the Google, they can capture the new gold, per se, the new oil, meaning what is we're talking, the seminar is about the future, future problems and issues. It's the data, the data. They're not interested into the equipment now. They're not interested into the research, whatever. They're interested in capturing. Sorry about that. Capturing the data and exporting these data, not only for the benefits. For instance, Netflix is not a transversal company. It was a distribution of box, of video at first, and it evolved into a streaming company. But even if it's specialized into Netflix, distribution of content and now producing and blah, 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 they still export for their own product what you like, so that they can have these series that you love because they have this information, which Radio-Canada or Télé-Québec does not have, right? So that's coming back to my informational asymmetries at the beginning. So that's interesting because that in itself is an advantage, a competitive advantage, asymmetrical, you know, and it brings a barrier of entry to the local companies. And not only that, Netflix and others, they sell this data to others that need. And that is why you can have Facebook or Google give you things for free. Not so much anymore, but you know, it's changing. But they sell publicity, you know. Facebook is a public infrastructure, global infrastructure, but it's being paid by your resource, you know, your data that you give freely to these companies, most of the time freely, not always, but, you know, and they exploit and they sell this data. And at the end of the day, they don't even want to give it back to you so that you can use it. So that brings me to my project that we did. It was a very challenging but very interesting, very interesting. So we said, okay, so that was 5 years ago. And actually I have this book that it's now, we have another one coming, but maybe if ever we finish it. But this one, it was 1 year or 2 years ago. And there is all kinds of, it was a project with Wallonie, Quebec Wallonie, and we have 3 or 4 chapters in that book. And we worked with Antonius Vlasis and Destiny Chiwali to make this book. And there is a lot of international, also people from Europe writing in this. So it's platform, norms, and politics. So that book, in my chapter, I talk about the fact that if we want to understand the problem, we have to have data. But because we don't have data, because these are transnational companies, they don't want to give us the information. The CRTC in Canada asked for the data. They don't want, because the data is the name of the game. So they don't want to give the data. So it's going to be a struggle. And I don't know if, the CRTC or national agencies, regulatory agency can at one point have the clout to have this data, because these transnational companies are deterritorialized. They're all in the US, and the US is not going to be an helping partner in getting the data out to other countries. So it's going to be very difficult. So I was amazed when I was, beginning to work with the cultural industry, because we worked on a project on the modernization of the convention of 2005 on the protection and promotion of the cultural, in French, I know it in French, the cultural diversity, expression of the diversity of cultural expression. Okay, so they were happy to have this convention, but they were asking, is it efficient in the new technology world? They were afraid of the change, the coming of Google, of the GAFA, in terms of making that convention too much outdated and also national policy. And they were right, But when I did that first study, I was amazed at the fact that there was no data anywhere. So in my university, they had this huge project, and I'm a bit not angry, but disappointed that we never got the big project, because while we worked on data, well, first I noticed there was a problem with the absence of data, and then my university asked me if I was interested in going on a concours for a big subvention for information, computer research on this. So I said yes, so I worked on that, but I never got it because it was too avant-garde. I mean, I must tell you, it was too avant-garde. People were looking at this and were saying, wow, this is too much futuristic. Maybe now it would work, but anyway, I'm sort of beyond this now. It's behind me, so I did it without the money. I was on the other side. This project got me another subvention grant for doing exactly what I'm going to talk about. That is the construction of a data set on the problem. Is there a problem of asymmetrical presence and visibility and recommendation of the local content on those platforms? Because everybody, when you talk about that, everybody has, oh, if you talk about the UNESCO, there is a big problem. At Francophonie, there is a big problem. If you go in the United States or somewhere else, oh no, if you talk about the tech companies, they'll say, no, the best way for national content to get a platform for the world is to be on Netflix. So, there's really two camps, and so I said, well, you need a methodology, you need data, you need a theoretical, a conceptual framework to be able to say, is there a problem of discoverability? So I said it, the big word. I didn't want to investigate the diversity of cultural expression because for me it was too complicated and there's a lot of literature. There is the Sterling methodology. But for me, I was thinking and I was reading a research report on discoverability that was done with the CRTC. They made a big summit, I think it was in 2015, on the discoverability problem. And I said, this concept is very much modern. Discoverability, it goes with the tech world, it goes with the cultural world, and it goes also with the trade world. So because it's modern, okay? So it's not necessarily a new concept, but it's very much in sync with the structural changes that I was going to study. So what we did, so I got people, partners in the audiovisual sector, in the music sector, also the OCCQ, who's the statistical branch that study cultural industry and globalization in Quebec. And they were interested in that because, they were too big to investigate that, because in big infrastructure, you need a lot of will to and go into avant-garde something research. So, but we were small enough and crazy enough to do it. So they were a partner. And I also was really lucky to have a team of researchers that are interested in trade. They're interested in the internet, and they're interested in also the musician and actors themselves. So that was great, because I needed a big team, and not a big team. It was a small team, but with a big in sense of rich in terms of, whatever the problem that I've described to you, you have to have the head, like for instance, Jean-Robert Bisaillon, who's working with me, he knows the internet, he knows all the norms, the coding, he knows all the standards of the cultural industry on the internet. He is an expert on metadata, and he's also a musician, and he was part of the cultural industry for the longest time, and he's doing a PhD with me. And the same thing with Guy-Philippe Wells. He's also a musician, and he's an expert on trade. He has a degree in economics, and now he's doing this PhD with me, and he's a singer, and he was part of the cultural industry, and he knows everybody in the cultural industry. So that was great. So first of all, what is a local product? That was the first problem. So we had the concept, discoverability. I'm going to define that more precisely after, but we needed to know, what do we want to be discovered? How can we study the discoverability of something when we don't know what this something is? So that's the first problem. So we asked the industry to give us the list of new items. And we said, for them too, it's problem. What is local? What is national? What do we want? Is it French, the problem? Is it the independent stuff? Do we want? I said, we don't care. We just want to know if we want, we can take a list of whatever you think is important to be discovered, and then we're going to take that list and we're going to do a test. So the first test with this list, so we had a list of music. It could be a list of artists too, but we wanted to see the product. So we have the list in music, the list of film and series that were provided. No questions asked, okay? Let's not get into the identity problem, which is a big problem in itself, because we wanted to see if we were able to follow this, and develop a methodology to say, is it discoverable? So the concept of discoverability, we divided in 3 parts. The first part is the presence. To be able to reach the user of whatever platform, you need to be able to be present. So, and of course, our problem was because users are moving toward the big platform, we will focus on the big platform. Are we present on the big platform? Because that was the problem. If everybody migrates to this big platform and our local products are not there, well, that's, the whole system of radio diffusion broadcasting and the financing of creation, local content, gone, So the presence of the music, and I don't want to bother you with, all the charts, whatever. I want more to discuss the ideas, the general ideas with you today. But what was amazing is that it was different on every platform, like on Apple or Google or Spotify. It was different. So what we saw is that the business model of being like a moteur de recherche, or to be an equipment, or to have another kind, like for instance Spotify, which is another kind of business model, it has an incidence on the result. So you could say that some platforms are better than other in making present the local content. Then what explains this? And when you go into what explains this or that, that means that you can pinpoint what are the specific barriers of discoverability, of entry of your product on this big platform. That's interesting because then you can inform actors, local actors, and also, if need be, regulatory agency to act upon this problem, the specific problem, okay? So the music was there about 80%, but it's normal because the music, there is no much problem with all the rights linked to a music. It's a different model than, it was always very much structured like that. But as you know, the series and the film is structured very organized, very differently. And even though Netflix want to have a transnational, terrain, we know that if they want to buy rights, it's more complicated, okay? So for the novelty, the new products, and the year that we used was 2018, from 2017 to 2018. There was no much presence, as you could imagine, on Netflix. A bit more, of course, on YouTube, and of course, one other interesting thing is that we also measured every day with a computer expert. Every day we were able to take to follow this, and so there were 4 or 5 local movie and very few teleseries also on Netflix, and again, on YouTube and Apple, because it's very different model, especially when Apple was with a fee and not the streaming. It changed over time. Okay, but what is the most important part? We can talk of the presence, but the more important part is the visibility, because you can be there, but everybody knows that on the internet is, you have to capture the attention of the user. Even though everything is on the internet, you have to find it. And everybody's fighting for that spot, So it's another kind of a programming that is they don't want to talk about the programming, but they are, So the visibility is, are we trying to identify on each platform what was pushed, for according to sort of some kind of a curation, from the platform, and not taking into consideration the recommendation part. Okay, we'll talk about that later. So we were able to identify that in the top not recommendation, but the most visible, there were no local content, or very few. That in the music, and even more in the audio visual sector. For instance, everybody knows that with the algorithm, if you're not present, you will not be visible. And because there's no local content, well, there's no life around this product. There's no dynamic around this product or around this artist. So there is a lot of, when we talk about asymmetrical relationship, the local product are not visible, because they're not pushed. And of course, you probably know about search optimization. The algorithm, you can pay to be on the first spot, So there's a market of this too, So the idea that, the big platform are telling us that it's the best way to be in the world and to be seen in the world and to be visible to the world, well, it can be contested, according to whatever we observe. And the last is the recommendation. And that's, when we talked about the big market around the data, this is, probably the most important part. Are the algorithm giving you what you want, and what you should discover, or what you would like to discover? That's a big question. So we had 2 basic profile. One was mainstream mostly, and the other one was more local content or international product oriented. More not how to say that, totally opposed to mainstream product, of course, a 50% mainstream and then local and international film, blah, blah, blah. And we wanted to know if their behavior was going to get something different. And of course, there was something different, But what is the most important is that a lot of the platform recommended mostly, as you would imagine, the mainstream music. And it was really, we noticed that it was really difficult for the local content to actually be recommended, because there is a lot of explanation for that, but one of which, like there's the attention of the user, difficult. That's the first barrier. We're lazy and we take what is being recommended. So as we say, now that I've made that, I studied this, I know that if I want to have good recommendation, I have to work a lot, with the algorithm. I have to push myself, the algorithm, but, it's not everybody that can do that, right? And also is the fact that, local content, we have very few. We have very few local content. For obvious reason, because it costs a lot of money. We don't have the same kind of industrial cloud. And so if in the internet you're very little, you stay very little, because the internet is based on this algorithm and the activity. So it's exponential. So the product are going like this, it's not. And now we have a project that is actually interesting. The fact that if we can take an artist and linked it to another artist outside of the I would say space of that actor or that artist on the internet, maybe you can get out of that I would say like cluster problem. So that is it contests another idea of the internet, is that the links are dynamic and you don't need to work them. Of course, it's not true. The political economy of it, based on our research, points to the fact that we need to up the algorithm, because the algorithm are not neutral. They are biased for popularity, for financial reasons, for business model reasons. So when the big tech company talk about neutrality of the algorithm, we have to be very careful. And that was a result of our research, to be able to demonstrate that there are biases. There are biases, and these biases means that we have discoverability problems, because there are discoverability barriers. So now I don't have much more time, because I see the time flies, and I don't want to. I would prefer to have your questions and to discuss freely with you. But let me just tell you to come back to the asymmetrical regulatory problem. Is that we're facing companies that have the regulation, they regulate, they structure the industry, and the actors, the local actors, are more and more dependent for their survival, even our identity. We are dependent on these tech actors. And I don't know how it is in Mexico. I've been following a little bit. I know there was debates and there are activism on this issue, and the same in Canada, because of course the destructuration of the national cultural industries has been documented, and we did a little part, but a lot of studies and information. There has been also a process of debating the CRTC, the big communication and telecommunication and broadcasting regulatory agency in Canada, to change the laws, But of course, all the lobbyists from Netflix and the GAFA are against this, and they counterattack with different arguments. One of which is that, our laws are supposed to be regulating Canadian companies. They are not Canadian companies. Well, now they're in the process. Some of them are in the process of doing it, and some of them have been, like opening companies, so being, Canada. But can Canada regulate extraterritorially in some instance? Can Canadian law be addressing a problem that comes from the United States? So it brings the when I say that we have to think outside of the box with the regulatory framework, is that we need now to regulate transnational cultural services flows. and we're not equipped to do that or to regulate that, not even in the trade agreements and not even nationally. And probably you know that now there were a law that was being discussed, and now apparently it's going to be adopted and will go forward. And one of the main change, well, first of all, the word discoverability is in, this new law, and the big change will be, making sure that the CRTC can be digital ready, can be able to surveil this new landscape of broadcasting and delivering content in a way that will be able to reach public good. And that we mean what? How to define the public good? Well, the diversity of cultural expression is one of the biggest important goal that we have this convention at the UNESCO. So of course, we want to have the diversity of cultural expression, but there is also the question of language, the questions of the independent film, and also the mode of financing. We will have to find new ways to finance and to make sure that big actors like the platforms are contributing to financial schemes for local content production. So it's going to be a big job for the CRTC if the law goes forward. And I would say, am I optimistic or pessimistic? Probably more pessimistic, because we're too late. We've been talking about that since 10, 15 years, since we saw it coming, and we haven't been able to do anything. Of course, in Europe, they do something about the data. Maybe we will go forward, but in terms of the cultural industry, the restructuration is already completed. So I don't see how we can reverse the tide, even though we progressed a lot in terms of understanding the structural change and the regulatory problems. Can we solve it? Well, it will depend on the CRTC, but maybe it will be better equipped. But can it make a big difference at the end of the day? Let's see. That is for the future.
Okay, excellent, very good. You posed the main problems. Really, they're very impressive, and also because I think Canada has a specificity, that Canada and other countries, obviously, that don't speak English, not Canada, Quebec, and it's also for Mexico. We don't think about that much about content, local content. What happens with the local content, with the local culture, with the local music, with the local arts, that doesn't appear anymore, in these platforms. How can we? As you said it perfectly, So it's very interesting to hear from you, because you're from Quebec, and you defend the French local content, the French culture. So it's a very good this conference, this talk would have been very different from coming from an American. He would have posed some problems which are less, which are important for us, but maybe they're more. They talk more to Mexico than coming from the United States. Before I have some questions from the public, but I'd like to just say something. I think it's very first, something that I didn't get. You talked about 5 Ds, and I have dematerialization, deterritorialization, complementarization, and then disintermediation. And what is the 5th? I didn't get. You have 5. no? 5D, which are very interesting, no?
Delinearization.
Delinearization.
Meaning before it was linear programming, linear, like, like in linear. And now it's all, you can skip, you can browse, so it's not a linear programming, now we have to, people that talk about, it doesn't mean that there's no programming, as I said, because there are, there are programmings. Program. We are guided. There's no TV guide, but there is, in a sense, in a new way. But in terms of the old way of saying, at this time, we used to say, and that was like a cultural event too, like same channel, next week, same time, and everybody at the school, going back to the school the next day, would talk about, oh, did you watch yesterday? Because everybody was watching the same thing. So it's very important, D, because, now we have programming, so it's not linear anymore, and it changes also the social impact. Now we have people saying, did you watch the 5 episode of the new Stranger Thing, Actually, the one it's coming out tomorrow, right? The new Stranger Thing episode. So we know that everybody is going to be glued to the Netflix tomorrow. Different things, different ways of.
Yeah. Oh, it's very interesting. And also, what I thought was very interesting is that because there is one question about regulation, no? Because the questions from the public, no, there is a question on the regulation. How do you regulate this? How do you think this can be regulated? Is it possible? No. But I think what is very interesting. Maybe you answer it. I'll let you answer this. But I think it's very interesting that you analyze this problematic, no, from not only from the perspective of regulation, no, but also from the perspective from below. Let's say, no, how do we introduce content into the platforms? No, yeah, that's a very interesting thing. How do we do that? No, it will be is it a task for the state to do this, or is it a task for the social? No, for society, for individuals, no.
Right. So we have defined. I mean, I didn't have time to go into all the details of our research because it's been 5 years, but we have separated two. Because now we have the problem, and I said from the problem we can find barriers of to discoverability, and some of them are functional. And some of them are structural. Functional barriers, you can probably, like for instance, you can have education, or have seminars, or atelier, whatever, so that local artists and local producers and distributors, they know how to master the entry and the visibility and the recommendation, so they can have strategies of discoverability. And there's a lot of funds. I mean, Quebec was really good on that, giving a lot of funds to different actors according to different objectives to equip the industry to transition. It's not only, we're more dependent, but we also we have to adjust to the new digital realities, So there's a lot of industrial transformation. And actually, as I was talking about Jean-Robert Bisaillon, he's also a consultant, and he's helping other partners and companies and artists to be able to understand the role of metadata, to understand the standardization of internet and the schema, in all the standards of the organization of discoverability issues on the platforms and on the internet more generally. I mean, you have to say that we talked about the platforms, but there's also discoverability on the internet, which is another problem, wider problem, I would say. And then when we talk about the structural, The structural, there's so much the local actors can do and modernize their ways of doing the practices, At one point, there are barriers that the CRTC or the politicians and the lawyers, they have to tackle this, with new laws and new ways of doing this. For instance, if I know that in the new law there is not quotas as in the old world, but there are ways of measuring discoverability that are being implemented. I think what the CRTC must be doing right now is to make sure that they have new computer elements, and a new computerized system of surveillance. And they have to get away either with Statistic Canada or who else, to find ways to get the data. Because without data, you cannot have any grasp on the problem. And if at one point, the CRTC has to make sure that we are discoverable, they have to be able to discuss with the platform, hey, do you think you can do better? And we think that, we are not very discoverable, we're not present, we're not visible. So I guess les termes de l'échange, the state will probably enter into negotiation in that way, engaging the platform into this new kind of diplomacy in order to make sure that we have a way to surveil and to regulate in order to achieve the very basic objective of public goods that are inscribed in the law, that is.
It's impressive. Another question, another commentary from the public also. You mentioned the problem of the fact how do you say that? The knowledge, the technical knowledge, the platforms have the technical knowledge to do many things that the regulators do not have, Are they, in Quebec or in Canada, are they working on this aspect of the question?
Well, in Quebec, we don't have, it's, again, maybe it can change, but in Quebec, we don't have the leverage on the telecommunication or the broadcasting industry. We have the cultural policy and also culture, le ministère de Culture et Communication du Québec, but the communication part is mostly in Canada. But I know that, I know for sure that if it is in the law, it's probably within already being studied how to be digital ready. The CRTC probably working on plans to be digital ready because you cannot put something in the law if you have not planned for it, and make sure that you will be able, because that would be terrible. That would be terrible if you announce something, you put something into a law and you cannot. I said, because there's a lot of things that I can say more about this discussion in Canada about the re-regulation and the new law that being debated since I don't remember how many years. It's been so long, but I know that, one thing is for sure is that the role of the CRTC is going to be central, and the research element, probably was something we did, because we presented what we did, the measure of discoverability problems for local French and English Quebec list, and they were impressed with what we did. So I know that they are studying what also other countries are doing, Europe and also the British and Australia, and there are experimentation, there are debates. So I know that they must be and they know there is a technical element. As I said, now when you are the CRTC, you're not only how to say that, regulating broadcasting and telecommunication in a national setting. Now you have to do it, taking into consideration the transnational or the trade aspect, which was not there, and now the digital aspect. So yeah, it's in the way of surveilling the cultural industry before was really much in the national setting with the local broadcaster, the local cable distributor. The telecommunication was something else, you see. It was completely outside, but now, they have to take into consideration the fusion of telecommunication and broadcasting, and also the global aspect, So they know the problem. And as I said, will they be digital ready and efficiently digital ready? That I cannot answer, but I know that that's what they have to accomplish if they want to be serious with the new law and its implementation.
Yes, that's very, very interesting. I'll give Mauricio.
Une seconde.
Excuse me?
No, it's my computer that was talking to me.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Mauricio, if you want to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Lan. And also thank you, Michelle, for the talk. It was really interesting. And I think these 5Ds are really interesting to think this new phenomena and to keep thinking about this, the different dimensions that we have to be aware of it when we try to understand this complex new digital world and this interaction that is so regular with the platforms. Every day we have this interaction, at least and myself, I have this relation. So it is quite important to look how this affects and how the way we consume these cultural products. In my case, for example, I play music also, and I upload some products to YouTube. But it's quite interesting that I don't receive anything from this, because sometimes I use music from other people. So, but all the content that I made is the money it produces, it goes to the composers of the music, even though I just used 5 seconds, and all the work that I made, it's worthless in that sense for me. I don't have any. And it's interesting how this affects people who is making different products and maybe are using like quoting and saying, this is not mine, but I'm using for this purpose. And then you don't get also this push from the platform to be seen, which is also important. But my question, it was more about the algorithm, how it functions. And as we know, and as you pointed out, it is not, it is biased. Is it possible to regulate the algorithm or to make autonomous the algorithm from the control of the platforms? And this could be the common ground to negotiate the rules that will define what are we able to see or not to see, or to get access or not to get access. And and just a little bit more about what did you find about the algorithm, how this works?
The concept of bias in the algorithm, I think there's a lot of debate right now about the transparency of the algorithm. But then again, it's the data is the new gold, but the algorithm is the exploitation part of the data. And the new business model are based on that. And the fact also is that they evolve every day, or they change. And so there's very strategic, and it's also very much evolutive. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge. How can you ensure the transparency of the practices? I think, again, the interesting part is you have to show the discrimination. I know that a lot of people are working on that. I could maybe, like, if you're interested, contact me, and I will forward you to a group of people that are working mostly, because, I mean, the algorithm is also the profiling, into the law, justice, and it has been documented that it's very discriminatory in some sense. And so I think that it's not only the cultural industry, it's also going to be a wider transversal debate on the use of algorithm. It's used everywhere, in all kinds of setting and sectors. So I think the transparency is going to be important, but also to develop how to say, conceptually and methodologically and technically ways to address the discriminatory part, like the bias part. But first, you have to document the problem. And that's the thing. If you can't document it, they can tell you, my algorithm is neutral and it's not biased and it's the best. It responds to the user and for the good of the user, So I don't know if you've been on the internet, trying to look for a plane ticket or a hotel or whatever. It's funny how suddenly you will get all kinds of publicity, and you think you're doing a good deal. But most of the time that I've been in front of that problem, which is outside of my study, I made a bad choice. So the quality of the recommendation of the work of the algorithm is also important, because sometimes you think you're making a good deal, and then suddenly you're in a hotel that is like, 70 kilometers of where you want to be, Oh, I didn't look at that, because you have a big round there and you think so there was a lot of manipulation. And I think that la protection du consommateur, consumer protection will have to be adapted also for this, because we're being scammed many times. So it's not only bias in terms of, our citizens, and also in terms of the cultural industry, but it's also in terms of the consumer and the user in general, But I think the concept of algorithmic responsibility will have to be regulated by the state at one point. And I think in Canada, there's talk of that, but I'm not, my colleague, Destiny Cho Ali, has made a study on that. So it's available on the internet if you want to look at it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're almost finished, but two things that impressed me very much were, and there are a few comments on this, the asymmetry, the asymmetry between these platforms, what they do, what they know, what their power, you talked about the algorithm, their technical knowledge, and the rest of the nations and the society and the individuals. It's impressive, this asymmetry that's growing every day, and so it's impressive that you focused on this, And another thing that impressed me very much is that how these platforms control the media, and the content, at the same time, and that sounds very dangerous, really, that sounds extremely dangerous.
Yeah, and it's not only dangerous for, as I said a bit earlier, you're right. It's not only dangerous in terms of our cultural local industry, but also in terms of our democracy. Yeah. We know everything about the fake news, and Marshall McLuhan, he was saying we're going to become tribes at the end of the day, and I think that's it. There are tribes, and we don't debate anymore. We stay into our groups. And I think that's why university is becoming, much more important, because it's only within the university that we can try. And I find, as a professor, I don't know about you, Ellen, but it's becoming more and more difficult, especially that we've been teaching, virtually, and the chats and everything. People are creating subgroups, and they don't see each other in the corridors, and they don't take beers together anymore. Anyway, so in Canada, it's been a real problem. But I think the university has a great responsibility into that, to generate debates that are based on tolerance and also inclusiveness. Otherwise, yeah, we're going to be manipulated and not sure. I mean, now that Twitter is probably going to be our next big problem with Elon Musk trying to, I don't know if it's done or not yet, but there's a big parade around this. But yeah, so we have to watch for Twitter, because that's probably going to be a big model, because also that Elon Musk is controlling a lot of satellites that is supposed to be generating internet free for the poor.
Yeah.
So, and as I said at the beginning, there's nothing free in this world. So we have to be careful.
Yes, incredible, impressive. Well, really, thank you very, very much, Michelle. It was very.
It was my pleasure, Ellen. We have to do that more often.
Yeah, we should do it. No, it's very impressive and very interesting. And this will be online, so we'll see how this evolves. How many people will see it in the next few days. There are some people that are seeing it now, in live, live and under. It's not really live, but live, And now this is live now, But okay, thank you very, very much, Michelle.
Okay. Maybe next time we can see each other in real life.
In real life.
Real life in life.
Exactly, live and real life. Okay.
Mauricio, thank you so much for being there.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Ciao now.
Ciao.